Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. Well, it's great to see so many of you in the chat on our live online interactive platform here at the Open University. My name's Karen Foley and I'm chair of one of the Access modules, and I'm going to be talking to one of my colleagues, Sara Haslam, who is a chair of one of the other Access modules. And we're going to be talking about first things first, getting started. So we've heard already today how excited and a little bit nervous everybody is at home. We're sharing lots of ideas and talking about the benefits of being OU students. And Michelle and Anaya are on our hot desk, liaising with you and getting all your comments. How's everyone at home?
It is a really good conversation. People are really excited. They're talking about how they're going to balance life, study and children. A lot of people with children. Tracy has 4 children, Maria has 2, Joy has 2 adult children, Lucy has 4 children, different ages, so trying to balance that. We've got people talking about their study rooms, where they're studying. We haven't had too many comments about pets, and I think it would be nice to have some more comments about pets. And Priya, what have you seen on there?
So we're just talking about different techniques. Davin's mentioned the technique for that's called Pomodoro. So it's like a concentration technique. So I guess the key is, trying to find out what works for you and when is best for you to study. So yeah, lots of great information here.
Perfect. Now, this is my pet. This is my study buddy, who I introduced last week when we were looking at some note-taking activities. So if you'd like to send us a picture of your study buddy, you can do that to studenthub@open.ac.uk, and we can put it on our board, and we will send you something back from the broadcast team, because we're involved in many broadcasts with the BBC, so we'll send you something from there. Sara, let's talk about getting started first things first. Now, you're chair of YO31, the Access module Arts and Languages.
I am, yeah.
So you should know everything then about what students should do to get started.
I don't
and everyone at home seems pretty organised, so don't worry.
I don't think I know everything, but I'm really happy to share a few tips that I've learned along the way, both as a tutor, as a student myself, and also now as chair of an Access module. And it's a really exciting opportunity to be a chair of a module which is helping people at the very beginning of their student journey. So yeah, hopefully I've got some good tips.
Brilliant. So what should they be doing first, days before modules start?
Well, I've heard some really good suggestions already, and I'd like to underline some of those. I suppose the first thing I'd talk about is your study space. And while there have been some suggestions about how you set up your study space, I'd like to just encourage people to be confident about seeing a study space. It can be a very small area. If you're sharing, we've been hearing about people who have 4 children, who have 2 children, busy lives, lots of people in a household perhaps. Think about just reclaiming an area of the house that's yours for study. Yes, if you can get access to a desk, you will need that sometimes, but sometimes just a corner of a sofa in a quiet part of the house is enough, and then you make yourself at home there with your books. So study space is important, but be sort of imaginative about how you make and how you find that study space. Maybe you have a little object that you put next to you which turns it into a study space, whereas otherwise it's your kids on the sofa watching the TV. So be as imaginative as you can. And the other thing I'd encourage people to think about is the fact that your study space is also about your mindset. So I know when I was a student, anytime I was on a train, I would have a book and a pencil. So when I was doing my first degree, which is many moons ago, so I wasn't going to be studying on my phone, I wasn't going to be studying on my iPad. It was a book and it was a pencil, and actually that was all I needed. So if I was on a train to visit family or friends, 2 hours, 3 hours, that was study time that I was going to use to the max. So I suppose study space is also a state of mind, and it's about you just giving yourself the opportunity to form a bond with all that exciting content that you're going to be introduced to, making sure that you have no distractions, making sure that it's just you and the book and the voice of your tutor in your ear as well. That's important, and we'll come on to talk about that.
So for you, studying isn't necessarily a physical thing in terms of sitting down with highlighters, pens and pencils and doing it. It seems to be more about a mindset, or I guess a purpose in terms of what you're doing and when you're doing it. Because some people might say, well, that's a bit disorganised. I don't intend on, sort of winging half an hour or 15 minutes on the train. I don't intend to. I want everything to be nice and neat and tidy, and I've got my highlighters, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think one of the other things I'd say is that it's important to know yourself as a learner. So one of the things you'll probably be asked to do, whatever module you're beginning, whether it's an access module or whether it's a level 3 module, is think about what your goals and your aims are in that period of study. And to those goals or aims, I would add a bit of reflection as to who you are and how you learn. So for some of us, it's very easy for us to find a 15-minute window and to really get something out of that little period of study. And then it might not matter where you are. But for some of us, we need to be more planned. I mean, all of us probably like buying stationery. We've got some nice sort of collections here. So I think there is certainly something to be said for making sure that you do have dedicated space and you have dedicated pens and pencils and all the things you need. But I also think if you're the kind of learner who can be flexible, that will benefit you because it will enable you to find places and times to study that maybe aren't immediately obvious. And to think of it as it can kind of fit into small spaces in your life as well as big ones. And for some of the students we've been hearing about this morning, I think that's essential.
Yeah, I once had a book and it was a lovely book, a very expensive book, and I couldn't work with it because I had to do everything nicely and in order, and it was the most awful thing. It really stopped me studying. And when I just sort of scribbled on the back of pieces of paper and I could photocopy things and draw them and cut and paste them, I was so much happier. But I remember that being a real stumbling block because I thought studying should be done in a certain way.
Yeah, I think knowing what you need to support your learning is the fundamental thing. But encouraging yourself to sometimes be a bit more imaginative about what you think you might need. And I would say, when you're talking about kind of all those neat notes, I would say the most important thing is forming an individual relationship with that content.
Yeah.
So if you do find yourself on a train and you can scribble notes in the margin, that's going to remind you of what you were thinking about as you were scribbling, just as much as a very neat kind of underlined systematic way of working through the materials. So there is time and place for dedicated periods of study. If you've got a piece of an assignment to prepare for, if you've got something that's sort of more long and complicated that needs working through, but there's also space and time, I think, in any module for those kind of more immediate, more focused, quicker interactions with your material when time allows.
Perfect. We asked people at home what they were most concerned about. Let's see what you had to say. So in the lead, we've got the content. 22% are worried about time management and 11% are worried about space for working. So that brings us very nicely on to our next point. Now, before in the previous session, we spoke about the fact that students' content might be very different. Some might get a book, a USB stick, or a link to a virtual learning environment. How do we decide or find out what is in our module?
Okay, so I heard George talking earlier about the module website. Most modules at the Open University will have a module website, and that's a really good place to go and find out what your module looks like. You know, is it mostly online? Is it in print? Is it a combination of those things? Most modules, again, will have a combination, and you will just need to visit the module website to be given an indication of that, and that might help you in turn decide how and where it's going to be best for you to study. The other fount of information when you start your study is your tutor.
Yeah.
And so if you do find yourself on the module website and things aren't clear, then as soon as your tutor has begun contact with you, that's the ideal opportunity to introduce yourself, express any concerns you have, and also ask any direct questions about the module, the module content and how your module is going to be delivered. I mean, it is a really high number, 67%, who are worried about the content. And if I can just pick up on that, I would say to people to feel confident that the people who've written the material you're going to engage with are really aware of the level of the material that they're writing, whether they're writing the material at the beginning of the module or the end of the module, and what stages are needed to get you from one place to the other. People who write Open University distance learning material are experts in not just the content, but in how you teach in this kind of way. And I would just really encourage students to be absolutely confident that the voice that they are engaging with through the teaching materials will be aware of the competing things that are on their students' time, but also what they need depending on whether they are a beginning student or a more experienced one.
Now, 80% of people watching right now, Sarah, are at level 1.
Yes.
And actually, I must explain to you, we've got all these little acronyms which you'll gradually get the hang of. The most important one is TMA, Tutor Marked Assignment. But we've asked what area you're studying. We've got FAS, which is the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. We've got WELS, which is Wellbeing, Education and Language Studies. We've got FBL, Faculty of Business and Law. And STEM is Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics. So they're really, really broad areas. But you can have a go at whatever one feels most appropriate in terms of what you're doing, but don't worry if you get that wrong. So we've seen the sort of students that we've got at the moment. Now, this is a really important point, Sarah, because so often, you know, people are studying because they want to learn something. I want to be a mathematician or a psychologist or whatever. So the content seems very, very important. But as you say, so are the skills. Now, level 1 is the time when hopefully everyone will make so many mistakes. They will learn so many new things. And it's all about the skills, writing essays, writing reports, learning equations, showing workings that are all, as you say, embedded within the curriculum.
Absolutely.
And those are the things that almost, when you get to level 2, if you've skimped on some of those activities, you won't then have those ways of thinking, which are very important. So in that sense, whilst content is very important, because it's often the centre of your TMA, your tutor marked assignment, actually what you're saying is these skills really will carry you through.
They will. They will. They will allow you to get the most out of the content and to build on what you pick up at access level or at level 1 in order to take forward. Because skills like note-taking, skills like different kinds of reading, whether you're skim reading, whether you're reading in a more detailed way, you can't just apply those to other modules in the future. You can also apply those in your life in general. So skills, I would say, yes, fundamental. I think personally that the most successful module material is the module material which embeds the skills with the content. So you're almost amassing the skills without really realising you're doing it. But that's why reflection is important, and that's why listening to your tutor in terms of where they're asking you to work on your skills. If they do in feedback, that's really crucial as well. So reflection, I think, is one of those skills that is vital for students to pick up as early as possible, so that you're not just thinking about how you're learning, why you're learning, when you're learning. You're also thinking about, am I getting the most out of this learning that I possibly can? And listing your skills, honing your skills is a big way of checking in about that.
Perfect. Now, welcome everybody just joining. Please don't apologise for being late. We're here all day pretty much, so you can come and go as and when you please. We also have a catch-up facility available, so if you've missed previous sessions you can watch those, and we have hours, literally hours of content that is really, really valuable on our Student Hub Live YouTube channel. So if you'd like to know things like critical thinking or about the virtual learning environment, there's all sorts of things that you can catch up on there. This is a live and interactive space for you to talk to other students, meet some of the staff at the Open University, and hopefully have your questions answered. So do let us know any questions you've got in the chat. Sarah, we're doing a session later about tutor and tutorials, but I wanted to talk to you about this relationship between a learner and the material, and the way that often people think, well, if I learn the content, I will absorb it. If I get my tutor, they will mark what's right. But actually, it's more of a reciprocal relationship in terms of how you learn and who you learn with.
Absolutely right. I think it's almost like a conversation between you and your material, and it's also a conversation between you and your tutor. So it's definitely a three-way conversation, and that relationship needs regular sort of checking in. Is it going right? Is it working smoothly? And I think one of the things I'd suggest that beginning students do think about this week is, what kind of relationship do you want with your tutor? Okay. Regularly, I've taught at the Open University for a long time. I've chaired a number of modules. I've looked at a lot of surveys. We get a lot of feedback from our students, which we take incredibly seriously. And if I could isolate one thing that students always comment on, it's how wonderful and supportive the relationship with the tutor can be. So I would say part of that early thinking before you start your module is, how am I going to get the most out of my tutor? And that partly means how am I going to approach this as a learner? So I would say that means thinking about how can I be proactive? How can I give early warning if there are any issues that I'm experiencing? Because the earlier your tutor knows if you're struggling with some content, if you're struggling with a problem in your personal life, if you're struggling with anything that's kind of impacting your ability to study, the sooner you give your tutor notice, the sooner you'll be able to start thinking about a solution together. And I just encourage students to be aware of the fact that tutors will have seen it all before. Open University students have a very particular set of demands and experiences, and most tutors will have had to support multiple students in the past through tricky times, and their main aim is to try and get students to the end of a course of study if it's at all possible. So don't feel worried about burdening your tutor. Don't feel worried about telling them things they won't have heard before, because they will. Don't feel worried about confidentiality, because they will treat your information with the utmost respect. But what they will be really wanting to do is seeing how they can find the support that you need to get you back on track.
Because while a tutor's not your friend as such, it's that same sort of idea with a friendship, as you can't just run off and hide when things aren't okay. It's about actually sort of acknowledging, I guess, where you are and what that other person can do to maybe support and help you.
Absolutely right. And whereas I believe that you are most likely to get a successful experience out of your study if you treat the materials with respect, if you do all those activities, even the ones that look like you can skip them, if you do then look for feedback on those activities, I think that your relationship with your tutor is one of those things that needs that attention. So it should be treated in the round. And your tutor isn't a friend. Your tutor is a professional and is paid to be doing a job. I would say treat them as a really important supportive resource throughout your studies, and your colleagues in the OU will be backing you up.
Now, your final word before I ask you to put your item on our hierarchy of needs is flexibility.
Yes, I thought that would be one thing I'd like to stress. So at the beginning of your studies, most modules will say to you, what are your learning goals? What are your aims? What do you want to get out of this? I mean, many of our students will talk about what they want to achieve in their career eventually, how this might support them in getting a different job or getting a promotion in the current post they're in. But lots of our students are learning just because they love learning. And they can do so with the Open University flexibly and in the way that I've said, amongst people who know what it's like to learn at a distance. And we have a really wide range of content that's available for people with a huge range of interests. But I would say, whilst at the beginning it's important to have an idea of where you want to go, I would say always be open to change. One of the things I think is amazing about education is it's a transformative experience, and you can't necessarily predict how it's going to transform you. So people may start thinking they want to do a certain kind of course next, or they're aiming for a certain qualification, and they may be totally blown away by a particular piece of content that takes them in another direction. So I think my final word would be flexible, be open to the changes that education can bring to your life.
Now, Paul put a hierarchy of biscuits at the top of our hierarchy of needs. What have you bought, and would you like to reorder anything?
I would really like to. I mean, I'm very fond of my colleague John, but I think I'm gonna bump his chocolate off the top and put my apple there, if that's okay. And I chose the apple because I looked at the hierarchy of needs. This wasn't something I knew about before, so I've looked at the hierarchy of needs, and it's obviously a physiological benefit because it gives you some nutritious food, some nutritious energy. But it's also, as somebody from a literature background, it also has a good place, so an important place in literature. If you think about Snow White, for example, an apple plays a prominent part in that fairy tale, doesn't it? William Tell, and also the Bible. But I don't want to think about it as forbidden knowledge.
It's not very
symbolising
positive connotations on the whole.
No, it's symbolising the reach, the grasp. How far can you go? What knowledge can your experience of the Open University bring to your life? How can it enrich it? And also, how can it give you a good bit of healthy nutrition?
Perfect. Sarah, thank you very, very much. We'll put that on our hierarchy of needs. And thank you for bringing it on. I'd like an apple later too, actually. Very nice. Right, join us now. We're going to have a a quick video break, and then I'm going to have another student story with Claire, and then we will be back for our next session. So see you after a few minutes with another of our campus tour videos.